So the uh the premise of the book is kind of the same as the premise of the YouTube shorts that I made. So in 2022, in about June, I woke up at 4:30 in the morning, and you know that great feeling when you wake up and nobody wants you, like nobody's yelling for you, and you don't have to get up. It's fantastic. And I'm lying there, and I thought, you know what would be really funny? A sketch where there's a screenwriter or a novelist or an author, something like that, and uh she's like auditioning fantasy characters, but the fantasy character who turns up isn't quite what she expected, because she expected, like, she expects like this 16-year-old wife who only weighs like 50 kilos but somehow can use a war bow, and is really good at fighting for no apparent reason, but instead she gets this woman who's like 36 and just looks completely unimpressed with everything that's going on. um and that was the start of the shorts, and then I made that. I was like, that was fun, let's make another one. And then a plot happened, which I was not expecting. And so it ended up, from one video, it ended up as 50 videos and about 45 minutes of content. Um, and everyone went, you're going to write this into a book, right? So we have Caroline, and Caroline is a self-published author. She normally writes romance, which is basically uh, fan fiction with the serial numbers filed off. Like she was in fandom, she wrote fan fiction. People were like, "Yeah, you should do this," and so she did a bit of an Ali Hazelwood and filed the serial numbers off and started publishing it. And she's decided that she's going to write her first kind of entirely original novel, but her characters won't do what she wants. So you have three layers of the novel. You have Caroline's real life, where she has a job and stuff going on, and a somewhat interesting relationship with her editor, Henry. You have the world of the book, where Rosamund Hawkhurst is in a fantasy world and there's a war going on and she's trying to make peace. And then you have the thing which is sort of the sort of unique part of the book, which is where Caroline steps into the story and talks to her characters, by which I mostly mean she argues with her characters about what should happen next. Um, and so the story is what's happening in Caroline's life, what's happening in the world of the story with Rosamund, and how those two things interact.
And it's superb because you just have this amazing, and being all of us wanting to be authors, it resonates so much. And then all the fears that the writer has, and then the questions, and it was just like, oh, that's brilliant. And then the fantasy aspect of it, oh, sorry, so total fangirl here. And I hope everybody here reads the book because it's amazing. um, yes, Harleen just said, I love it when a plot blossoms after a few shorts. Those shorts are fantastic and very relatable. So you've got another fan in there completely. Um, so um, as you've got it from having 20 million views, and then into an actual book that readers are loving, um, can you talk about any difficulties that you had in this process of making that happen?
Uh, it would have been, like, I feel like it would have been such a clever thing if when everyone said, "Oh, what the comments I started getting were, this is just cover because you're secretly writing this book and you're promoting it." And I'm like, if that had actually been the way around things had happened, that would have been so clever. That would have been like marketing genius. But everyone went, "You should write it into a book," and I went, "No." And they said, "No, but you should." And I went, "No." And so I went, okay. So after I finished making all of the shorts, I finished them about a month before they went up. And so I thought, I will try writing something. And I've never been able to write anything that wasn't fan fiction, and that was a very long time ago. That's more than like 5 or 6 thousand words, and then I just get stuck because I don't know what happens next. And I thought, but I do know what happens next, because there's a whole story here. There isn't much of a story because it only takes 45 minutes, but we can give it a go. And if it turns out to be horrible, it need never see the light of day. So I wrote sort of October, November, December, a kind of zero draft of about 55,000 words, which was, it was mostly the shorts, and there was a little bit of Caroline, and there was a lot of Caroline, there was a lot of Rosamund and her story. There was a lot of Caroline talking to Rosamund. There wasn't a lot of Caroline's story, but there was a bit of it. And I went, okay, I mean, it kind of sucks, but it's, it can be improved. So I spent kind of the next 3 or 4 months working on it myself, and then I had a developmental editor, uh, and then I had line editing, which was just the worst, because I had to do all the line edits over the summer holidays with no childcare. It was not a good time. I got up at 5 o'clock in the morning a lot, and I'd never done it before, and I was like, "Oh, this is blah, blah, blah." Copy editing was less bad, and then we had typesetting and proofreading and all that kind of jazz before it came out in February. Um, the the first draft kind of just appeared. Like obviously I had to write it, but I kept typing, and I was sort of compelled, like I can't stop because I know what's happening right now, and if I stop, then I might never be able to start again. And so the whole like the whole writing experience has been characterized by I can't stop because if I do, I don't know if I'll ever start again. Um, the I think the most difficult part was like the doing the line edits, because that was what took it from sort of a book to now it makes sense. But yeah, like well worth it. But it was an interesting couple of months.
That's absolutely inspired. And it's so amazing to hear your process. Um, is exactly what we talk about here at Fictionary, which is get the draft out, then go to developmental, then line, then copy, then proof. You're just like, no wonder it's so brilliant. You just had a process that obviously worked for you and made it a really successful book. So I found out about Jill because corsets and sword fighting. She comes up on YouTube and she's amazing. So I am fangirling a little bit and pinching myself because I can't believe I'm actually getting to speak to Jill. And after reading her book, honestly, I can't tell you how brilliant it is with all these different layers. Um, so how did you go about building distinct worlds though? Because you've got two, you've got the imaginary world, and then you've got the real world. How did you get that immersive part to your story?
I don't really know. The uh I think it was a little easier because Caroline's world is the real world, basically. And so I'd always I'd always pictured her as having a a job, that wasn't, that she wasn't a full-time author. It was something she did on the side. Um, and one day, like I was having a D&D session with my friends one day, and one of them said, "Yeah, sorry, I'm late." Something, and then he said, something which was related to his job, which is in IT. And I went, "That's what she does. She works in IT." I was an engineer, like I have a degree in mechanical engineering. But I was like, it's not that because she's not me, but it's something like that. And he was like, "Yeah." And so Nick got like a very minor character named after him in the book, because I was like, right, I need to pick your brain about corporate IT. And I made him read the parts of the draft where I'd put in things about Caroline's job. And the worst part of that was that every single thing I wrote, no matter how ridiculous it was that happened to her, he was like, "Oh yeah, something like that's happened to me." Um, um, so like everybody's had a terrible boss. Like Caroline has a terrible boss. Who she writes her life into the story to a certain extent, but everyone's had bad bosses, so that was easier. And then I had a friend on hand to be like, "Hey, I need some plausible things that I can say in here about her job." He was like, "Okay, we can do that." The fantasy world was in some ways easier because during the shorts I'd just been making stuff up, and so I just continued in that vein. And the nice thing about it is, uh, the the meta aspect means you can stuff it up and it doesn't matter, because the whole point is this is Caroline's first draft. Like it's a very clean looking first draft, but there's a whole bunch of stuff in it that kind of doesn't make sense. If it were, and so that there were things with like the birds and the world, and what kind of magic do you have, if any, what's like the religious system. And if it seems like, I'm like, it doesn't matter if it seems like a sort of weirdly shallow, really tropey thing because it's the first time she's ever done this. It's the first time she's written a fantasy book. It's the first time, and so she just like grabs things and shoves them in and sees if they fit. Um, but it seems to have turned out okay. Like people seem to like the fantasy world, which is great. How much people like the parts in Caroline's real life seems to depend on either whether they've ever worked in IT, or if they've ever had a boss like George. So those two things tend to make people like it more.
Um, I have to say that your talk about it being a first draft is one of the many genius parts to your writing, is because that fantasy world, as a fiction editor, as a fiction writer, I just was like, I totally believe this. I'm not questioning any of it because it's just the first draft of this, and it's brilliant because of that. It's just absolutely genius, and it gives you so much freedom to have fun in that. And as a reader, you get to have fun because of the fact that it's been written by someone who's never written fantasy before. And the forgiveness factor, genius, Jill. Absolutely. I was just sitting there going, wow. Okay, so in one of your YouTube videos that you posted about a month ago, I think you were talking about your numbers, and I hope you don't mind if I ask that,
Not at all.
because Jean McAuliffe has asked, did you self-publish? And she says she loves the layers.
I did. So when I told people on YouTube, sort of the beginning of 2023, I've written a draft. It's going to be a book. Um, I talked to a couple of publishers. Well, I made a short where I was like, Bane Books, you know things. And it was meant to be a joke, right? The joke was, hey, Bane Books, you publish fantasy. I've written this fantasy book. And then you go and look at the submission guidelines and they go, we like books that are 100,000 words or more, but definitely around there. And I was like, oh, never mind, back to the drawing board. But they got in touch with me and they gave me some very good advice. But they did say, to be fair, it's not a fantasy book, so we wouldn't publish it, but but it's good. We like it, but we can't publish it. It's not actually a fantasy book. I talked to over the course of the next whatever, like 8, 10 months. I went, well, I'll self-publish it then, because it seems like a thing that has a weird niche audience, but it definitely has an audience, but I know where they are. So, you know, um, I think for a lot of self-published authors, the marketing is the hard part. Like you write the book and you're like, I think this is a good book and I'm gonna put it out there. And then how do you market it? Whereas I'm like, no, the writing of the book is the really, really terrible part. The marketing is that's my job. I make YouTube videos full time. Like talking to people on the internet is what I do. So that's not a problem. Um, I had, I think, 3 different publishers contact me. And what happened in almost all of those cases was that I would say, "Oh, right, that's really interesting. Yes, I'd love to talk to you and talk about possibly traditionally publishing it." And then I'd send them whatever draft I was up to. Um, and then they would very kindly say, "I really enjoyed your book. We can't publish this. I can't market it." So we had a sci-fi and fantasy publisher, and they were like, "This isn't a fantasy book." And I said, "You are correct." And then I had someone who published romance. She used to work for like one of the very legacy romance publishers in the past, and she was like, "I loved all of the stupid tropes that you put in, and then you did things with them." But she was like, there's not enough contemporary in it for it to be a contemporary romance. There's not enough fantasy in it for it to be a fantasy romance. And because you have that meta layer, it's like meta fiction comedy, but there's no like genre for that. So I really enjoyed your book, but I don't know how we would market it. And so I went, that's okay. I know where my audience are. They're over here on my YouTube channel, so it's grand. But yes, I ended up self-publishing because I had that audience and nobody else knew where to put it, which has borne out in now it's out because it's like when people order it into a bookshop, sometimes they order a couple more copies and then they shelve it just anywhere. People have found it in romance, which makes sense. They find it in fantasy, that also kind of makes sense. They find it in sci-fi. Maybe they didn't have a fantasy section, I don't know. But like they just sort of shelve it wherever because it's like, what kind of book is this? What's the genre? I'm like, um, What genre is The Princess Bride? Uh, like, I don't know. Like, I don't know either. Comedy? Is that a genre? Yeah. It's been an interesting time. And I have waffled on for so long that I forgot what the original question was. I'm sorry.
Oh, so then so you self-published it,
Mhm.
and I watched one of your videos, and you were saying how you did so far on your sales figures, and would you be comfortable talking about that as well? Because
Oh,
that's
sure.
something
I
everyone.
looked them up and I wrote them on a piece of paper.
Ooh,
Because I thought, that would be more up to date. So I think, uh, altogether there were something like 18,000 pre-orders because I opened pre-orders for the book for the ebook about 6 months in advance because you can do that without the files on Amazon. And then for the paperback about 2 months out. Um, and then at this point, I've sold about 36,000 copies, almost exactly a 50-50 split between paperback and ebook.
yes, I
Thank you
think
for the
Lindsay,
pom
you're
pom.
right.
That's pretty
That is
good.
total pom pom moment. That's amazing. So this is a totally marketable book if you are Jill Bearup, because you obviously know how to do this and get your story out there. To the right people. And I really recommend everybody reads it because it is superb. I can't believe it's your first book. There's so much in there that's just so brilliantly done. And so you did mention that you're doing the 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 audiobook and then the hardback and then we're going to be getting another book from you. Is that the plan?
I have let's put it this way. I have no plans to do that right now. But I feel like it's sort of like people who say this to you, it's always men who say it. But when I'm like, I had a really difficult time writing this book.
Yes.
I did not enjoy it.
Oh,
It was really, really hard. Uh, and they're like, well, a lot of women say that they don't want children, more than one child, and then they have lots. And I'm like, I only have one child. Um, and that's not an argument that's likely to make me write more books. Like the thing that might make me do it again is one having an idea that I think is book supportable, um, but like not an idea like an actual plot.
yeah,
Because everyone's like, oh, you could write a book about this. I'm like, I don't
doesn't
know
resonate.
or care about that. It's like you should write a prequel about Rosamund and her husband before he died. I'm like, nope, I don't have a plot. I don't know what the story is there. Or you could write one about this. I'm like, I don't know what the story is there either. Um, but yeah, people have said very nice things, which has been very encouraging. Um, and that might make me, do it again, but only if I think there's a story worth telling that I have, if you see
Yes,
what I
and a
mean.
story worth going through the whole process that you've gone through.
Yes.
So being a an engineer, do you think that's why you found process something quite that you were looking for going through each part of the process, and that's why you've got a textbook process?
Um, I think that's because I like having I watched a lot of self-publishing videos on YouTube, basically, and they all went, well, you do this and then this and then this. And I Googled a lot of things like what is line editing, for example? Like what are all of the different kinds of editing? Um, yeah, I eventually ended up with a Google Sheets document. Of all of the days and what happens on them because a friend of mine was like post-it notes and I went okay and I tried that and it went horribly and they fell off everywhere and they got stuck to my clothes and so I wrote a Google Sheets thing which is not infallible unfortunately because we were like right at the end of the process in the copy editing part and I suddenly realized that there was a chapter where one of the characters just disappears for 36 hours. I'm like, where did he go? Robin, which necessitated it, like nothing particularly exciting happened to him on the way. But I was like, I emailed Stephanie, my editor, and I was like, Steph, I'm gonna send you a new chapter 14 and 15 because Robin's gone missing and I don't know where he went. So I
Oh,
need to fix that.
that's absolutely brilliant. Okay, so Harlan said that's a great way to think about self-publishing versus traditional publishing, smiley face. If you know where your audience is and up for a challenge of marketing to them yourself, that may be worthwhile than traditional publishing. And thank you for this insight. It's worth considering. So you're giving inspiration. That's absolutely fabulous. Um, Katie McWilliams has said you need another 4:30 a.m. revelation. It's not
Yes.
for anybody else to give it to you. That's for you to have. Um, and Harlan said that's what fan fiction is for, to elaborate on stories if the author is pretty set. So maybe you'll have someone write fan fiction about
Oh,
yours.
it exists. It already
Oh, how
exists.
exciting!
Because it exists for the it's a few exist for the book, but most of them exist for the series. And so there was fan fiction written like I was on, I don't know, maybe the 20th video and people started writing fan fiction about it. And I went, I love that. That's amazing.
Oh, that's beautiful. Right. So Jean said, if another book should erupt out of you, check out Fictionary. Pain is turned into joy in the writing process. Yes, thanks, Jean, for that. So I don't even have to say it, but yeah, Fictionary would help with making sure that that doesn't happen. So the dual storylines with that one in the middle where they meet is absolutely inspired. So people talk about, breaking that wall where they talk to the audience, but to be actually having the writer talk to their characters and saying, it was absolute pure gold. Um, and so was this just something that you at 4 a.m. it was like, I can see the writer getting frustrated with their character. And I mean, what was that?
Yeah, so I had been watching a lot of TikTok, and one of the sort of rabbit holes I had fallen down was those series, of which there are several, where one actress plays all of the characters and they do ridiculous tropes. So there was one called, the series is called Rune, I think, and Caroline is named after, she's named after two Carolines. She's named after Caroline from Portal 2, as in the evil computer, because she has a little bit of that vibe in the early videos. But she's also named after Caroline Cladonis, who performed that series. And in that series, you have Rune, who is the main character, and you have all of these different other characters doing just traditional tropey things, and they're a series of sketches. And I was like, you know what would be funny? Um, if you had a character who didn't want to do that, and then the author trying to persuade them to do it. That would be funny. And here we are.
Oh, that's absolutely brilliant. Okay, so Katie McWilliams has said, if another fantasy writers have a book and want to do shorts on YouTube, what advice do you have for them? Asking for a friend.
Asking for, of course. Um, so shorts are really, they're surprisingly tricky. A lot of people do them and then they're like, oh, this isn't working at all. And it's usually because they try and fit the their usual stuff into a short format instead of thinking about what shorts are themselves. And so if you want to be entertaining in short formats, you have to be interesting and preferably funny, and you also have to be brief. Like you have to, when you do a short video like a TikTok or a YouTube short, you have to start, you can't start with hello, my name is, and whatever, everyone's already gone. You uh like you can talk about things that interest you. You can talk about your book. Uh, it's good if you don't just talk about your book though, because otherwise people are like, ah, yes, there she is talking about her book again. Um, if if you act out bits of your book and people like it, then that's brilliant. But you can talk about more general things like tropes that you like or things that are in your book that are in other things, or this is, I really like this part of fantasy. Do you also like it? I have it in my book as this, but whatever. I'm not doing this very well. Okay. I like magical settings that have this particular I'm losing my train of thought. I like fantasy books where this particular thing happens. In my book, it happens, and it also happens in other book that you like. What are your favorite books that have this trope or whatever? It's if you're gonna do it, try it because like I find it fun. Not met Some people don't. They find it kind of uncomfortable, but just talk to people like they're normal and like you know them. I mean, some of them are actually weirdos, and you will need to block them, but quite a lot of people are normal, and some of them might like your book and might like to hear about it. So, there is an audience out there who like reading books and would be interested to hear what you have to say.
My next question is, can you hear me still?
Oh, I missed you for a second, but you're back.
Okay, I'm back. Okay, so this sounds like it's a lot like you got to write a mini story where you have an entry hook, you have so you hook the reader in, and then you have a inciting incident to the short, and then you have a middle, and then you have a sorry, everything will go okay, and then you have the climax of the short. It sounds like you're building a mini story over and over again, and maybe that's why you're absolutely brilliant at writing, is because all your videos are stories in themselves.
Um, well, I will take the compliment on being brilliant at writing. Yes, absolutely. If you to write a good short or a good video in general, it has to have a point and it has to keep your attention. And it's the shorter they are, the harder. Funnily enough, the shorter they are, the harder you have to work to keep people's attention. Because if you turn on like an hour-long podcast, then you might be listening to it while you're driving or cooking or gardening or whatever. But if you're sitting down watching something and it's only 45 seconds long, then you have to keep them for that whole 45 seconds. Otherwise, they are watching something else because they can do that.
That's really important to remember. It's the same in books that they can put your book down at any time. So keeping them hooked in your book is also critical. Um, let's talk swords, if that's okay. Just,
Absolutely.
slight way to the 9 swords you've got in your house. So how often do you sword fight in a corset? Because this isn't maybe asking for a friend here myself. So do you do any more of that?
Usually not in a corset. We moved house a couple of months ago, and so basically my entire life for the last few months has been things related to the book and renovation. So I have not found myself a new like HEMA group or fencing group yet, which has been kind of sad, but I'm like soon it will be the summer and I can go fight people with swords again. Um I
So just for anyone, do you want to just explain what HEMA means?
Oh, sure. So, HEMA is historical European martial arts, which is the sort of fancy way of saying they fight in a kind of old-fashioned style with some kind of sword that was popular in Europe. So, I have 9 swords, but I think 4 of them are lightsabers of some description, so they don't really necessarily count. Um, I have one of them is a longsword, and when I lived in Kent, I went to a club that mostly focused on longswords. So that's one of the longer ones. They're about a meter long, and they have a long handle, so you can put 2 hands on it, and everything is designed for you to use it two-handed, which is my favorite. If you have a big sword, I have to have 2 hands because there are other shorter swords. Like Excalibur is what we would call an arming sword, and you can use 2 hands, but mostly, you can use one hand. Except I'm, 5'6" and not that big, so I get tired arms very quickly. I like it better if you can put both hands on it. Uh, so I'm hoping to find somewhere that I can do that here as well. I've also done fencing, but I don't have any specific fencing swords. I do have one that has a fencing blade on it, but it has a fancy little hilt to make it look like a small sword, but you can use it for stage combat because it's blunt.
Fantastic. So, sword fighting in your book was, so maybe I should not load this question. Which was the favorite scene to write in your book?
Oh, it wasn't actually the sword fighting scenes. Though they were, to be fair, they were some of the easier ones to write because um I wanted them to be so like they're brief, but they're quite brutal. Um, but the thing is, having done longsword fighting myself, I'm like, Rosamund, like she literally has my body, which is a very weird thing to write into a book. Everyone's like, is it a self-insert character? You know, I'm like, they can't really help it. They've literally got my face. Um, but uh most of the things that she does are things that I learned at my longsword club. And I was like, yes, we will do that because that seems like that is a good thing to do, which is straight out of the sort of historical manuals that taught you how to fence, and they work. Whereas, like if if you are even if you're reasonably well trained, if you are like short and a woman and fighting like four guys set on her and Captain Collins in the scene, and he deals with two of them and she deals with one of them, and then the second one knocks her over. I'm like, she can get the first one, and you can tell that she is good at the sword fighting. But also, if somebody just comes at her, from behind or something, she's uh like it's not going to be fun. She's not going to be able to do something clever to get out of it when there's somebody who, outmasses her and outreaches her. Uh they were fun to write because they weren't difficult. I was like, I can see what's happening in my head and we're going to do that. And also they had to sort of follow what was happening in the shorts, which I'd already blocked out, but only in my head because I was the only person in the video. Uh I think my favorite scenes to write, there were a couple. I really enjoyed writing the scene with Rob. I really enjoyed Robin and Leo interacting because in the videos, obviously, it's just me, and so Caroline talks to Rosamund, and occasionally Leo or Robin talks through Caroline to Rosamund, but you can't really get any of the, what the other characters are thinking because they're not there. But it was really great to have them be able to have their own characters and go off and do things on their own. So I really enjoyed the sort of fill-in scene after Leo and Robin have escaped from prison, and they're on the road together. And then I really enjoyed the scene where they're having a little heart-to-heart chat when they arrive back at Rosamund's house. Um, because I didn't get to write those when I was writing the shorts because I couldn't have, I would have had to have talked to myself while wearing like an eye patch or a wig or something, and it would have been weird. But they were really nice and they flowed quite nicely as well. And also they were funny, I think. So that's always good.
That's fantastic. So after after getting this the scenes and everything, you said that you found it really difficult. So was it the line editing that was the moment that you kind of felt the lack of confidence? Because you're giving yourself permission at the beginning of saying this doesn't matter, it'll never see the light of day. But when you got to the line edit, maybe you were more invested that this was actually going out into the world. Is that when you felt that the difficulties started?
Yeah, I think mostly it was like a logistical thing, because I had this project before me and I didn't know how long it was going to take, and I knew how long I had to do it, but I didn't know how long I was going to need to do it, but I knew how long I had, and so it's like this sort of big unknown thing that I've never done before that seems kind of scary. And I felt that time pressure. Um, and so I got very, very stressed. And then by the time I ended up talking to someone about it, they were like, you don't seem very stressed anymore. And I said, no, because it's September. So my daughter is back at school and I finished the things that I have to do. So now I'm like, there are copy edits coming up, but I've already done one round of line editing. So this is going to be less painful. And also I know I have hours in the day where no one's going to bother me. So it's going to be fine. But yeah, I think also now it's real and you have to get it done because people are waiting for it, was quite a stressor as well. Like No, it doesn't matter how you feel about it, you have to do it. Whether you think it's good or not, you just have to write the words down because people want to read it, which is
Yes,
nice. And
absolutely.
it got it done, but it felt a bit pressured.
So, your book cover, can we talk about that? It's
Sure,
absolutely gorgeous.
I brought it.
Um, exact. It's wonderful because it says the genre, which lots of people say they don't, but it does because it has the funny post-it notes on it, which I've got these post-it notes where I'm sure that we all do, that you put into books and everything else like that. And it's just so how did that come about?
So my original concept for the book was, or for the cover was quite different because I was thinking, the people who are buying it are people who have seen the videos, and so it was my face, or rather, it was Caroline's face and Rosamund's face split in half. And one side had Caroline in her sort of everyday world and she had like little post-its about the book
Mhm.
on a board behind her, and one half was Rosamund's face, and she's wearing a cloak, and there's a castle in the background, sort of thing. And it was okay, and this was what like the font and everything for the typeface was this one. But basically, what happened was I went to stage combat camp that summer, to to pretend to fight people with swords as you do. Uh, because we were, I did it to pass some more exams in a couple of different weapons for the stage. And what would happen was I would tell people that I was writing a book and they would be like, wow. And then I would show them the cover, and every single one of them, because actors are really bad liars, as it turns out, which is funny, their face would do this split second kind of like, um, like, I don't like this. And then they'd be like, "Wow, that's amazing! How cool that you're writing a book and all that kind of thing." So it happens once, and you go, maybe they just don't like it very much. When it happens like three times in a row, I called up my cover artist and went, "Hey, so I know we've spent like a week and a half working on this, but we need something else because it's not right." And so I went on Amazon and like searched for a bunch of things which were romance and funny, and I came upon Magical Midlife Crisis.
Mhm.
And I went,
Yeah, brilliant.
that's really pretty. Can we have something like that? And so I went, can we have flowers? Because lilies are a sort of important part of the thing. And on the spine there was already a lily pattern because we already had the pink spine. And I went, can we have flowers, but they're metallic and they're heart shaped? And then we're gonna add some notes. Caroline's gonna add her notes, and the characters are gonna write on it as well. And it was originally like in black and white, like it was a rough sketch of a cover. Um, and then Scott, my cover artist, mocked it all up, and I went, actually, could you add color? And he was like, I was hoping you'd say that. How about green? And that's how we ended up with this. So the notes from Caroline are my own handwriting, and then each of the characters, Leo and Robin and Rosamund, they all have a different font.
That's absolutely amazing. It's beautiful. But how brilliant to take feedback so well. Because that's something that I've learned is the fact that you do have to go, is that subjective? Or okay, there seems to be a pattern here, and then being able to go on from that. So another question, how do you deal with reviews when you've got them against your book?
I have a review buddy, um, who also, if I'm like, I feel like, and I'm not sure if this is a universal experience, but I feel like reading reviews is just like an act of personal self-harm. So sometimes I do it, and I will like try and minimize this by like I'm going to filter by the 5-star ones so that people will say nice things to me. But it's every time I do it, I'm like, this is not good for you. You should not be doing this. This is not going to help anything. But sometimes I do it anyway. But I do have a review buddy, who he's like, I will send you the nice ones, like the really nice ones. And I had a couple
That
from
friendship is worth everything to get the good reviews in. That's absolutely amazing. So if anyone has any more questions, please do pop them into the chat. Um, so will you be going out and doing a tour, a book tour, and doing signings, or is it all virtual and online?
Um, I'm going to Worldcon this year. Not as like as in I bought a ticket and I'm going, and so uh like I'm hoping I will meet a bunch of people there because various people who are my patrons who are subscribed to me have been like, oh yeah, I'm going to Worldcon as well because it's in Glasgow, which is not so far away from me as Worldcon usually is. Um, I am actually doing a signing in Canterbury, which is in October. And so I'm like, I'm hoping to get the audiobook out by October. Not that Waterstone sell audiobooks, but still, I'm like, it's a thing that can happen at the same time. Because I used to live in Kent and I tried to book a signing for around the time that the book came out. Uh, but they were like, yeah, but how about October? So I said, I mean, I move house next week. They're like, yeah, but you can come back. I'm like, yeah, I can. And Caroline lives in Canterbury in the book, so I was like, yeah, let's go do it. Um, uh, more signings or anything like that, I don't have any current plans for, but we'll see how it goes.
Ah, fantastic. Holland said, I'll see you at the Worldcon myself. So that's very exciting.
Awesome.
Um, my nephew went to Canterbury University, so I've been down there and it's absolutely glorious. So you must have had a wonderful time. Okay, we've got another question in here from Ash. I know you've much experience with stage fighting, and you mentioned the fight scenes were easy to write. I'd love to hear your thought process or any advice and tips when writing a fight scene, as these are the most intimidating scenes for me to write.
That's fair. I have three. So when stage combat is really useful for this because in stage combat you first of all you learn choreography and so you learn the things that people tend to do in any kind of fight. Uh, but also you learn that fights tell a story. And so when you're writing a fight scene, what is the story? Um, and it's got to have there should be an arc in the fight scene or a reversal or whatever, the same way that you have in the story. So you start and you have, these characters and they're fighting each other. You don't need to describe it a lot because a lot of people skim fight scenes, but also people can imagine it in their heads, which is great. Uh, but then something unexpected happens and you think that this person is winning, but now this person is winning, but now whatever. So give it its own little tiny arc. Um, and give it a point. Like maybe the point is that your hero isn't as good as he thinks he is, or maybe the point is that you've just entered a terribly dangerous place and you didn't know it was going to be that dangerous, but now someone's jumped you. Oh no. But yeah, err on the side of simplicity for descriptions. Uh, keep it relatively short and give it its own story inside your story and make it mean something. Otherwise, it's just people hitting each other with sticks.
That's brilliant. So choreography, have a fight arc. That will resonate with everybody in Fictionary because we talk about story arcs all the time. And simplicity and short and have a meaning to it. That's, I think, the best actionable advice for a fight scene I've ever heard. Thank you so much, Jill. That's one of the gems that I'll be repeating over and over again. Every fight scene must tell a story. Amazing. Thank you so much for coming today. It's been absolutely wonderful to hear about your self-publishing journey and how you've gone from an idea and then turned it into a fabulous book. And thank you for coming along to the Fictionary community.
Thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Right, so Ash has said, thank you so very much. This has been amazing and encouraging for someone who's in the process of writing their debut with heart. And Katie said, thank you, Fictionary. And Jill, this was a wonderful place. Thank you so much for coming along. I'll see you all very, very soon in the Fictionary community. I'll get this recording and pop it up so it can go onto YouTube, and I'll pass it over to you, Jill, as well. So that's brilliant. Thank you so much, everybody, and see you all very, very soon. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.